You having fun yet?
Oh, yeah, I'm having a blast. Thanks.
Good.
God, sucker teed off in that like he knew I was going to throw a fastball.
He did know.
How?
I told him.
Yes. And the next time you screech, it'll explode into millions of eardrums.
Just so you understand, right now, out there on your own, your life expectancy is like here. With me, it's here. Without me, here. With me, without me. With me, without me.
Just however many times it takes, pump it, then you're in the water and off you go.
Always with the violence. Interestingly enough, there was a clip from Night and Day in our intro there. Part of that was shot in Worcester, Massachusetts, at the Worcester, Massachusetts airport, which to us is pretty local, pretty cool. I really like that movie a lot. Hi, I'm Mark. How are you? This is the Cinemaniacs. I am the Cinemaniac on screen at the moment. You are the Cinemaniac watching this at home in whatever state of dress or undress that you are. Keep it clean. And so before I go any farther, you may notice a little different with the visage today. Looks like I got popped in the puss. Actually, I had gum surgery last week, and I'm still a little swollen and I'm bruised. So our alternate angle may not be as flattering to my chiseled features as they usually are. So we only have about five or six to talk about this week. There was actually preponderance of films released locally, not all of which I was able to see, so we'll play a little catch-up next time. But we'll get right into it with the first film. This is good. So here we have a story of a guy from the wrong side of the tracks, been in trouble with the law since the day he was born. He's rough and tumble, and he is taken on by a more affluent, more cultured individual, who the cultured individual is a different race and is not necessarily socially adept and is sort of apart from the rest of the world. And together, these two people learn to love and laugh, and the rough and tumble guy teaches the more cultured guy how to get out of his shell and go out into the greater world and enjoy life. And this film is entitled The Upside.
But popcorn, she pops real good. I eat popcorn. Everybody eats popcorn. She tastes real nice.
This is based on a French film called The Intouchables, which I always think involves guys with Tommy guns, but it's not. Intouchables was a pretty popular movie in the art house circuit a couple of years ago, 2011, I believe it was. And I'm pretty sure that it was up for, if not winning, like Golden Globes and Academy Awards and things like that. So it was a really highly regarded movie. So when I saw the trailer for The Upside, I thought, wow, this looks real familiar. It's actually quite good, I thought, for what it is. Now, I will say that trailer is one that I saw in the theater repeatedly for months, and it's an instance of really the funniest things in the movie are in the trailer for the most part. It's not really a comedy. It's more like a drama with a lot of light moments. You have Kevin Hart in there, so you expect there's going to be an amount of comedy. He really plays it straight in this movie, and I liked him a lot more in this than the movies he usually makes to be comedic because, I don't know, I think he's likable, but the films of his I've seen I generally don't like. And Bryan Cranston is great as the paraplegic guy in the wheelchair who's unhappy with life. Theoretically, he has it all except the use of anything below his neck, but he has a lot of money and all of this other stuff. And it's structurally a story we've seen many times where the wild and crazy or non-conventional or person from the wrong side of the tracks teaches the uptight rich person or sad person how to go out and experience life and all that. It's the story of a unlikely friendship in many ways. It has some good laughs. It has some decent drama. It has a really good cast. Nicole Kidman plays Cranston's sort of executive assistant or something like that. And there's a few other familiar faces, but not many. It's really about Kevin Hart, Bryan Cranston, to a slighter less degree, Nicole Kidman, somebody else that you'd recognize is in it, but it's kind of a surprise when she shows up and who she is, so I won't get into that. But it held my interest. It really takes place predominantly in this penthouse apartment and a little bit on the streets of New York here and there. Good-sized audience when I saw it, grown-up audience, movie for grown-ups. I don't really think, there's nothing tremendously offensive in this movie other than some language, even when they talk about the whole catheter thing, which is actually a pretty funny, it's some really good comedic grimacing and reactions from Kevin Hart in that sequence. That's as crude as the movie gets, really. It does something that really bugs me with modern film. It's not a modern necessarily trait, but it's overdone these days, and that is you're thrown into this story at some high point of action or drama or suspense, and then it cuts to black and says 4 months earlier. I hate that. When I saw that it was doing that, I'm like, really, movie? I expected more of you than this. And ultimately, like 99% of movies that do that, you get through the film and you realize, well, that was really unnecessary. There was no real reason to put that cart before the horse when the movie moves along at a good clip. You're not more than 5 or 10 minutes in before that relationship is set up. So there's a lot of times I feel like films do that because they're afraid the audience is going to be bored or won't get the hook unless you put it right in their face at the front. But that's a minor quibble. The movie was a lot better than most movies who do that. As I said, it was a decent-sized audience. I saw this at a Sunday matinee at noon. Mostly adults, a good amount of laughs in the funny parts. Everybody seemed with it. Mentally, and they were with the film. So I would say the upside is good. It wasn't great to me, but I thought it was very pleasant, and it was a positive message or a positive outcome, which was nice. Can't say it was a very surprising outcome, really, but you don't necessarily go to these kind of movies to be shocked and surprised at how they turn out. So, upside in theaters now. Speaking of over here, now we have a film that's been out for a few weeks, but it just came to town recently, and I'm just getting caught up with it. It tells the tale of somebody from the wrong side of the tracks. They have sort of a criminal background, sort of a rough and tumble kind of person, and they get hired by somebody of a different race who's much more cultured and rich and classy, but because of that and other setbacks, they are sort of kept apart from society and apart from the people who love them. And together they sort of learn to live in love. And the rough and tumble person kind of teaches the more cultured person how to get out of their shell and really enjoy life and their surroundings a bit more. And this film is called The Green Book. Now I'll say that this is one of those films that I was happy to finally see that it was released so I wouldn't have to see the trailer anymore. Because this trailer has been playing for months everywhere I go, and I know every word of it, and it's like, I just want to see the movie, please. I don't want to see this trailer anymore. So based on a true story, and it is directed, interestingly enough, by Peter Farrelly, who's one of the Farrelly brothers, who are not known for subtle, moving, profound dramas. They're more about bodily fluids being splashed across the screen. And the Three Stooges movie, which I really, really liked a lot, shockingly. So here's the tale of cultured black concert pianist who needs to have someone drive him through the Deep South in I think this is 1962, 61 or 62, and a time when an erudite black man was probably not going to move too freely and flee through the South. So he winds up hiring Viggo Mortensen, who is we are introduced to him being a busboy and a bouncer at the Copa in New York. And that's the kind of guy. He's got friends in the family, shall we say? So it's that sort of dichotomy of opposites and two different sides of the tracks, two different races, two different worldviews, all that sort of thing. So there's a lot of that going on in the film. The push and pull of why aren't you the way that I think the world should be from each of the guys. And over time, it goes from employee-employer relationship to more of a friendship. And each of them are sort of this could be said of a billion movies that have already been made and will be made. Each of them has their worldview adjusted a little bit to sort of see the other as a human being and see the other's point of view and all that. The film is gorgeous to look at. It's an era that I find very visually attractive in terms of design. So the cars are gorgeous, and the houses and the decor inside the houses and the clothes and the music. The soundtrack is really good. You'll notice the intro I gave, sort of jokingly, I went to see The Upside, and then I was seeing Green Book directly after that. And I realized I'm about to go into a movie that structurally is essentially the same thing. And both films feature Aretha Franklin in a pivotal moment, her music, which I thought was kind of funny, that these two independently produced movies of each other wind up being seen on the same day, and you see how similar they are. So the film is very funny throughout. It's also very dramatic at times. It shows you the ugliness of elements of this country that sadly aren't totally gone. And it doesn't take place in the scheme of things that long ago. And some of the things that were common practice in areas of this country are kind of shocking when you look at them now. It's like, how the hell could that ever have been this way? And ask somebody a little older than you and they can tell you exactly where, why, and how that happened. Everybody in it is good. Viggo Mortensen, I was afraid he might be a little cartoony as the Goomba character, but he wasn't. Mahershala Ali, who was in Moonlight, who was from the other film that this director, Barry Jenkins, had made, I think Oscar winner from a year or so ago. I'm sorry, Barry Jenkins did a different film we're talking about today, but Gum Surgery. I'm on pills. What can I say? It's just ibuprofen, but it's unusual for me. So very good film, very good cast. Linda Cardellini as the stay-at-home wife of Viggo Mortensen is quite strong. And the audience, I saw this, the audience that was leaving the theater from the showing before I did, they were all like glowing how much they liked it. I heard an older gentleman, older than me, talking to somebody saying he was entertained every second of this film. So, and I saw it with a 3 o'clock crowd on a Sunday, very well attended, very strong audible reactions during the comedic moments, and I would pretty highly recommend Green Book. It's again, there's a little bit of fisticuffs in the film, but it's mostly off screen. There's language, there's racial epithets in the film, but there's nothing I would say that would be inappropriate if you wanted to bring a younger person to see it, if they were either interested in the interpersonal story or the history behind it. I know there's a little bit of there was a little controversy around the film from the family members of the Dr. Shirley, who's the musician in the film. Some of them said this wasn't an accurate representation of his life, but I also believe that the film hadn't been released yet and they hadn't seen it. So I have been meaning to go to the History versus Hollywood website to see if that website has a breakdown as to what might or might not be accurate about the film. But there's historical accuracy and there's is it a good movie? And I can say from experiencing one of those two that it's a good movie and I liked it. So speaking of Barry Jenkins, who I did in earlier, he didn't direct that movie. One of the Farrelly brothers directed that movie. Barry Jenkins, who did Moonlight, which is a highly regarded art house film, is back with another film. And this takes place in, I want to say New York City, again, roughly around the same time as Green Book. You know, this is somewhere in the 60s, maybe early 70s, and it's about a young black couple who are apart due to, well, the husband's in jail and the wife is not, and she is with child. And this is about their journey of how they came together, how they try to stay together, and how society and family reacts to them. And it is entitled, based on a book by, James Baldwin. No relation to Alec, not one of the Baldwin brothers. It is If Beale Street Could Talk.
Come in. Come closer. Closer. That's right. I'm Vincent Price.
I never saw Moonlight. That's one that came to town rather late. I think it may have come to town either after the Oscars or pretty close. And it wasn't one that looked like it appealed to me. So I didn't bother to seek it out. My vibe on If Beale Street Could Talk is that it is probably similar in some ways to Moonlight from what I know from the trailers of Moonlight. It is very, very non-linear to a degree. It's very sort of visually kind of poetic and lyrical in how it weaves some of the dialogue or some of the narration from the Baldwin novel into the film, and the narration of the novel is maybe a bit more poetic than how the characters speak. But it's interesting. Again, it takes place I meant to look it up. It's somewhere either in the late 60s, early 70s. Again, gorgeous production design. The clothes are gorgeous to look at. Everything in everybody's house, the cars, everything. And it's the tale of these two young people. It's this very innocent young girl and this very innocent young guy who've been friends since they were babies, basically, who grew up together. A relationship develops. They're trying to, strike out on their own in the world with no real resources and with not necessarily the support of both sets of parents in this film. And the girl discovers that she's pregnant. Unfortunately, her boyfriend, future husband, has been thrown in jail for a crime he says he didn't commit. She believes he didn't commit. Part of the film is her and her mother trying to, work with a lawyer that they can't afford to try to prove this man's innocence so that he can be there for the baby that's on the way. And that's interesting and sort of frustrating in terms of, you're seeing what the characters are seeing, what they're having to go through. How do you get justice in a world where most of the world is against you for who you are and you don't have the resources? Not a lot of rich folks go to jail, put it that way. So there's all of that. There's a little bit about, what it was like to be black in America at that time, but that's an element of the film, but that's not all the film is. It's really more just about people. And as I say, the more years go by, the more I'm preferring movies that are just about people than movies about lasers and people riding giant seahorses and things like that. Though there's a place for that, not in this movie. No major star power in this, which is, I think, good. Everybody I see, I'm taking as read that this is that character. I've not seen them in anything else, so I believe you when you say this is your name. Some really strong performances in here, some really strong drama. This is far more a drama than anything else. I mean, most dramas will have lighter moments, and it has moments of beauty and love and all this other stuff. But unlike the films we talked about earlier, there's no real laughs in this film, really. Sort of out of the gate, it sets a tone that there may not be a happy ending to this story. I'm not going to tell you if there is or there isn't, but it is a film where you're not really sure where it's going to go. There's some great moments. The moment I did laugh the most, I don't know if it was intentional or not, is at the beginning of the film, the young girl reveals she's pregnant, and her family sort of ultimately is happy about that, and they invite over the family of the husband, the young girl's husband, and the mother and daughters of that family are really not happy about it, and a really ugly incident happens, and then there's just some trash talking that I thought was wonderful. Words you don't expect people used back then, those words have been around forever, but when everybody looks so classy, when the C word starts floating around, you're like, oh, yeah, that existed in the early 70s too, didn't it? So I thought this is a film that's in pretty limited release right now. I saw this at the Alamo in Yonkers. I think it's a pretty slow rollout. I was reading that this and the Ruth Bader Ginsburg not documentary, it's a drama based on her earlier life on the basis of sex. Those are two movies that are opening wider over time. So these are films we will probably see locally where we're speaking right now. Where you are, I would look to your local art house, or if you have a multiplex with a lot of screens, they may have on the basis of sex, which I'm hoping to talk about next week, or if Beale Street could talk. But Beale Street was good. It makes you think, and it makes you appreciate what you have, and it was really well done. So that's all I saw in the theater this week that's new. I saw something else in the theater that if we have time, and I'm sure we will, I may yammer about at the end, my new business at the end of the show. Now we move on to home video, that which is available on the video service, platform, channel, device, or format of your choice. First up is a new film, the latest in a series of horror films that dates back to 1978. Arguably one of the biggest slasher films of all time, one of the biggest horror films of all time. Jamie Lee Curtis returns in the role that made her internationally famous as Laurie Strode. It's 40 years after the events that occurred on that October night in Haddonfield, Illinois, and she has dealt with those scars for the ensuing years of her life. She's back. Michael Myers is on the loose once again, and it all happens, wouldn't you know, on Halloween.
Children play someplace else.
So this is Halloween, not to be confused with Halloween or Halloween. This is Halloween, for clarity's reason. There was somebody once said that the director or whoever had a reason for just calling it Halloween and not Halloween the Return or something like that. And I don't know, I'm always hung up on things like that where it's like, so we're going to do a prequel to The Thing. It's not a remake. What are you going to call it? Well, we're going to call it The Thing. Did you like The Thing? Which one? There's three of them. So this is controversial. Oh, it's a controversial movie. Because when it was announced it was being made, Danny McBride, who is known as being in Eastbound and Down, the TV show, and being in a bunch of dumb comedies, was going to be one of the writers. And everybody's like, what are you doing? You're throwing it away to this goofball who just makes dumb comedies. Well, I don't know how much he had to do with this movie. I kind of feel like he was co-written with another person. I feel like you can really spot the things that he might have put in there. But this was a really well-made movie. I loved this, and I was really dubious about this. Now, you have the original Halloween in '78. You had Halloween 2 in '81. And then you had Halloween 3, which had nothing to do with the franchise, but I love and a lot of people like now. You have Halloween 4, 5, 6, and then that stopped. And then in '98, you had a movie called Halloween H2O, which was 20 years later. That film Jamie Lee Curtis came back for. And for that film, basically the whole film was saying, okay, remember all those sequels? We'll forget that. The first two are the only movies that exist, and now here's the next movie in the series. Then Halloween Resurrection came after that movie, and it was terrible, and it killed the series. And then Rob Zombie made a Halloween, and he made a second Halloween, and now the new movie called Halloween is the next film to say, remember all those sequels? Well, yeah, forget about that. The first movie is the only one that exists. So every 20 years, Jamie Lee Curtis will come into a course-correcting sequel for the Halloween series. As I was saying to Ernie earlier, kind of guessing she might not be around for the 60th anniversary, but we all hope she will. So this film takes place 40 years after the original film. as far as this movie is concerned, those events happened in 1978. Everything in all the sequels never did. And Laurie Strode is a grandmother. She has a poor relationship with her daughter and her granddaughter. And she lives in this fortress in the woods. And she's sort of like this survivalist, severely PTSD person who is just wrecked by the evening where all of her friends were murdered, and she almost was. And she's just sort of waiting for her chance to basically take out the boogeyman and put this to bed. It's very interesting. The film really is about dealing with trauma and moving on, and how a messed up individual who has gone through something really terrible and hasn't been able to deal with it, how that ramificates, how that cascades down the generations. So Judy Geer, who's great, is Laurie Strode's daughter, and they have a poor relationship because Judy Geer was raised by this paranoid mother who wouldn't let her have fun and kept training her on how to be a survivalist. And then you have Judy Geer's daughter, who's sort of the Laurie Strode, avatar in this film. And she's pretty well adjusted. She likes her grandmother. She's sad that there's a bad relationship, but it's just, you see how it impacts everybody. And I think a lot of folks can see that in their own lives or people they know. The film, my fear was this was going to be just like a knockoff of Halloween and just a retread, which a lot of sequels and remakes and prequels are. It really isn't. There are moments where they try to echo the original film, and that I really didn't like, where it's basically the same as a scene from the original, but the roles are reversed, or there's something flipped, or they resurrect dialogue from it. And that always seems cheesy, and it takes me out of the movie. For the most part, this is a really well-done thriller. Now, one of the controversial things is that there are certain incidents in the film that a lot of fans or people said, this doesn't make any sense, or that's stupid, or why would so-and-so do that? I liked the movie so much that those moments didn't really bother me. It is very disturbing and gory at times. There are moments where I was giggling. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing on the screen. Very, very effective suspense. Very effective, just creepy moments. It's a pretty efficient film from what I recall. It's got some really interesting visuals from time to time. Like you see in the trailer, the psychiatric prison where Michael Myers has been kept all these years, these two podcasters, there's a nod to the modern day, go to interview him, or they're doing a story on him, and he's being held on this in the courtyard outside. It's all these, it looks like a giant checkerboard. It reminded me of The Prisoner, and it's just this really striking visual that's almost like sci-fi and strange. That opening scene builds up an immense amount of tension, and then they hard cut into the Halloween theme in the opening credits, which are very reminiscent of the original film's opening credits. And I swear, I saw this twice in the theater, 2 days in a row. I liked it so much. I had already made plans to see it with a friend the second time, but I had no problem going and watching it again. Liked it just as much the second time. I probably would have seen it a third if I had the chance. And when that theme music kicked in both times, all the hairs on my arm stood up. It was just like, yeah, we've got a Halloween movie again. And it's not a lame Halloween movie, which I think, sadly, the majority of them are. So, yes, I recommend this new Halloween strongly. This is one I'll definitely buy when it comes out. I'm very curious to see what the extras are. I know there are some scenes in the trailer that did not make it into the film. So when I saw it, I thought, geez, I would even be happy with even more time with Laurie Strode to see how she just deals with life as this person so many years later. It's one of those movies where the human element of this slasher movie was so well done, I didn't mind that it wasn't all just a slasher movie. The kill stuff and the creepy stuff is very effective. There's a little kid that you see briefly in the trailer who's, Michael Myers gets into his house at some point. The kid is really funny. The kid's going to make some serious coin at conventions doing autographs because everybody loves this kid in the movie. A lot of people who didn't like the movie said that the kid is the only good part of the movie. So I really like this a lot. I would not be surprised if we saw a continuation of this story. It's, I don't want to say too much beyond that, but I would be okay with another one of these. But the problem is the last time we had, to me, a really good Halloween sequel with Jamie Lee Curtis, they made a sequel and they ruined everything that they did right in the first one. So we'll see what happens. I think this made huge money, so I think it's almost impossible to think you're not going to see another Halloween film, hopefully this year, maybe the year after. So now it's the Arrow Video Corner. We have 2 this week. It's been a little bit of a dry spell, for Arrow, but now we're back with 2, and I think next week we have 1 or 2. Actually, next week we're not on, so the next time you see me, I'll be in pitch darkness because I had a blackout. I blacked out briefly there. All this talking with the gum surgery, I feel like Doug. So here we have a film, not that old, actually. I was really surprised when this came across my doorstep because this is a film I saw in the theater and I reviewed on Blu-ray on this very program and not that long ago, and Arrow is giving it the Arrow treatment. It's a Guillermo del Toro haunted house ghost story creeper from 2015, not that long ago. It stars, sorry while I look over my shoulder to get her last name right, Mia Wasikowska, who you may recognize from the Tim Burton Alice in Wonderland film and a lot of others, and Tom Hiddleston. Tommy's in it. And Jessica Chastain, sorry. Blanking out on this stuff. And it's this tale of this grand old mansion and mining and Victorian times and ghosts and murder, all of which occur on Crimson Peak.
Gaylord, up, up. Now fetch your bone. Got it. Good boy, Gaylord.
So yeah, 2015. That was just like, you know, the way my mind works. That was last year, right? 2015. So we have the Arrow treatment. Now this is again a rare occasion where I happen to still have had the Blu-ray that Universal put out in 2015 of this film, and I can compare the new releases, I can compare the transfers, I can compare the extras, which normally I'm not well suited to do that sort of thing. So the movie. This was a movie that I liked very much in the theater. I'm not huge on Guillermo del Toro movies. I like him. I know he likes the kind of stuff that I like. He's a really cool guy. He's a historian. He's a great raconteur about this sort of stuff. But his movies always, they never quite fully connect with me. And he's done really good stuff. I mean, Mimic was fun, and the Hellboy movies were fun, and he did Devil's Backbone, which was good, and produced, I believe, The Orphanage, which is one of my favorites in the last decade or so. But his movies I'm never like, oh yeah, I love that one. This one I liked. He always can be counted on for a great atmosphere and great production design. And this film, the production design is all I really remembered about it. And it was in 3D in the theater too. So you have a sequence in this film where basically the story is that young Mia Wasikowska is this young aspiring writer, but it's an era where women can't really be writers. And she meets this sort of, he was either, I think he's a lawyer, or he's trying to patent this sort of mining machine and not having great success. They meet, they fall for each other, and she winds up marrying him and going off to live with him and his ill sister in their family estate called, I believe, Crimson Peak, where the earth is red. So they're digging up mud for mining, and it's all this red earth everywhere. And he's working on these processes in the basement with these big vats of mining, whatever it is, clay, I believe. And the house is ancient, an ancient giant mansion, but it's also in great decay. And very much like the House of Usher, Follow the House of Usher, the Poe story, the decay of the house mirrors the decay within the family and the mental state of some of the family members. And that's no accident, I'm sure, knowing Del Toro. And there's a sequence where there are like gaping holes in the ceiling of this house, and it's multi-story with like this giant center section, and it's like snowing inside the house. And in 3D, you had the snow cascading in 3D, and you had the depth of the house, and you had like, you know, leaves falling off trees. It was really gorgeous. I don't know if there was ever a 3D Blu-ray of this, but like any good movie, without the 3D, it still works fine. So the story is Mia goes to become this new bride, and strange things are afoot. She doesn't really get along with Jessica Chastain, who is sort of the ill and very protective sister of Hiddleston, and there's, you know, strange things are happening. The people are being killed. She's seeing, since she was a child, Mia saw ghosts coming up to her saying, beware of Crimson Peak, and on these other things like that. So there's a lot of strange gothic intrigue and creepiness to it. There's a lot of gore in this movie too, or I say a lot. When it occurs, you know it's there. This film has probably the greatest cinematic sink killing that I can figure out, and it has an excellent shovel killing in it as well. The ghosts are really well rendered. It's CGI. They have a really beautiful sort of look to them. They take me out of the movie just a little bit because I don't like CGI, and it never really works for me. But visually, this movie is amazing. You could watch this movie with the sound off, and I dare say you would still have a fine time with it. I watched it again to talk about it on the show to sort of refresh my memory and look at the transfer. And I think I liked this a lot more than I remember liking it the last time. I liked it the last time, but I thought it was really good this time. It's like top-notch acting. The music is great. It's gorgeous to look at. The bigger the screen, the better. And it is legit, you know, creepy and disturbing and scary at times too. And it's kind of pretty and sad and all that other stuff too. It's got that gothic. Gothic tends to have romance as part of the fabric of it, so it's got that going on. So I didn't take two monitors. I didn't have an A/B switch or anything. I looked between the two transfers. I didn't notice a big difference in the transfer of the Arrow edition of this film over the Universal edition from a few years ago. It's possible they did a new transfer. I know Arrow usually does. I've read articles about Arrow where they will often sometimes they'll take the film elements and do a scan and a transfer. Sometimes they will just get a transfer from the rights holder and then they'll do their own work on that. So it's possible they just tweaked what had already been done for the previous Blu-ray. Because unlike a lot of things Arrow puts out, this isn't the digital HD debut of this film. It's been on Blu-ray since it first hit video, so it's not night and day like a lot of the stuff they put out, like the H.G. Lewis films or anything. But it looks great. Extras, from what I could see, it's all the extras that were on the previous Blu-ray plus more. And the previous Blu-ray was loaded. So if you had the previous edition and you want to get the new one for the new extras, or the new cover, which is pretty gorgeous, or the booklet, or whatever, you're not sacrificing anything by getting rid of the old disc to get the new one, other than your old disc, so which is pretty cool. And I didn't delve too deeply into the extras, partly because I didn't care, but also partly because I didn't have time, and there's a lot. There's like feature-length documentaries on this, and a lot of stuff from the set and things about how it was made and talking about it and all that. So if you like Crimson Peak, golly gosh, this is a package for you. I do like Crimson Peak, and this is one of those that I'll be holding on to because this is a movie I'm going to watch again. This is a movie when I get a better TV, I'm certainly going to want to watch it on that because I think this is a film that'll show that off a bit. So the other and final Arrow film we have to talk about, fun for the whole family, is a very early Giallo film. Now, I say Giallo, if you've watched the show before, I talk about it a lot. Giallo was an Italian genre of film that took place from about 1970 or so up into the early 80s. If you want to trace it with Argento, it sort of really began in earnest with Bird with the Crystal Plumage in 1970, 69, and kind of ended with Tenebrae somewhere around there in like 82 or 83. People still make them on occasion. They're mostly tributes, and that style exists. And the word giallo is Italian for yellow, which was the yellow was the color of a bunch of cheap paperbacks that were put out in Italy that were this kind of story. They were sort of detective stories, but they had a lot of violence and they were kind of saucy, and the films are that. They're mystery stories that usually have like a slasher involved or a masked killer or a black-gloved killer. They're usually really stylish with the music and the decor and the clothes and the men and the women and everything, and they have some sense of perversion about them. And I don't mean like you got to keep them behind the swinging doors of the video store. I just mean they're like something is weird about the killer or how the killer operates or something like that. So here we have a very early entry, certainly inspired by Argento's film of that or the year before. And we have the tale of a woman who is being blackmailed with pictures that she doesn't remember having been taking, and she may be imagining all this. Is this person really blackmailing her? Are murders really being committed? Is it all in her mind? Is she crazy? Is somebody driving her crazy? Are they trying to drive her crazy? With forbidden photos of a lady above suspicion.
Hold on to your hat and come on with us for the most fun we've ever had on wheels, the Dune Buggy. By us, I mean my wife Maxine and me, Frank Gifford.
So you know me, if you watch the show, I like giallo films. I like giallo films like I like spaghetti westerns. There are certain elements that are just always present that even the ones that aren't that great I like because they have those things that I like about them. So here you have the tale, as I said a moment ago, of a sort of a classy cultured woman who is being blackmailed and murders start happening, and she's trying to figure out, is she going crazy, or who's doing this to her, and is this all in her mind, or is this just something that her fractured is her fractured psyche creating this, or is somebody really out to get her? So it's not a terribly original story, but what you have that makes this so much fun is it's 1970 in Europe, and everybody looks amazing, and the clothes are amazing and or ridiculous, and the decor is that European. Tim Lucas calls it op art. It's almost like space age. It almost looks like another planet half the time. The music is fantastic, and it's stylishly shot. And when the kills happen, they're really memorable. So I was with this movie the whole time. I didn't know right up until the very end when it is revealed, is this real or not? Because I'm trying to like piece it all together, and like the character in the film, you're sort of right along with them. You're never really given more information than the lead character is in this film, so you can sort of take their journey into madness or death or whatever. Transfer looks great, as always. It's a new transfer. If you like giallo, this is one that I hadn't really seen around very much. Some of these movies, different people have licensed them over the years, like Blue Underground has had certain ones out, or Anchor Bay, or certain ones get released again and again, so you might have had a shot at seeing this. This is one I don't remember seeing on DVD or VHS in that era. Probably wouldn't have been served very well by VHS. These tend to be pretty widescreen movies. So it was new to me, and I quite enjoyed it for what it was. Transfer looks great, music sounds great, loaded with extras. There's a commentary with Kat Ellinger, who's a sort of a cinema historian, and she talks about, like any of these that are good, and this is, she talks about, the history of giallo, where this film falls in that history, the various cultural and cinematic precursors to this, and how they reflect this. A lot of times these films are sort of, well, any film, any good one, is reflective of what's going on in culture at the time. So talk about, women's role in cinema, women's role in culture of Italy at the time, all that kind of stuff. So that's cool. There's an interview, a Q&A session with the lead, Dagmar Lysander, from a 2016 convention. There's a segment about the music of the film. There's a short documentary about the movie itself, featuring interviews with the people in the film and the director. It's loaded. Like Dean Martin, it's loaded. So some of the era releases are a little lighter on extras than others. This is pretty robust. It's not, menu pages and menu pages, but if you're interested in this film and it's intriguing, you get a lot more time spent with it and the world that it came from with the extras. So again, 2 for 2. This is one I'm keeping because I thought this was really cool. And because it's a movie I've never seen before, the next time I watch it, it will still remain relatively fresh. And with movies that have a lot of twists and turns, you tend to forget a lot of those little twists and turns, so they're fresh with repeat viewings. So that's all that's on my list. I've got a few minutes left, so why not give you all that you didn't pay for? So some other things that are interesting coming up. Documentary called At the Drive-In that I don't know that I've properly reviewed on this show. I've talked about it. It's a documentary by Alexander Manelli, a filmmaker from Pennsylvania, and it's about the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, which is where I spend my weekends in summertime. It's an all 35 millimeter, all retro drive-in, biggest outdoor screen in Pennsylvania, one of the biggest in the country, and one of the last to just be filmed. There are very few places you can see film at all anymore. And it's all staffed by volunteers and people who just love movies. And it's got a really great cast of characters, so to speak, and just we've built a really interesting fan base, or just like a family there. So this is a documentary about the drive-in and how it got to the condition that it's currently in with the current owners and this current retro thing. Beautifully shot. It's a lot of fun. I'm too close to it to judge it independently or impartially, but I really like it a lot. If nothing else, for me, it is a wonderful love letter to a couple summers I spent a couple years ago and my best friends in the world. But to everybody else who's seen it, they really like it. They like it just as people who love film and people who like people and other Barbra Streisand songs. That is coming out on DVD from our friends at MVD, funny enough. May have been my fault, maybe not. That is coming out April 9th, and if you go to Amazon right now and search At the Drive-In Documentary, picture of a screen on it, you can pre-order it now. So it's going to be out on DVD, and Blu-rays will be available on demand, I guess, which I'll be getting because it's pretty. It's really pretty. I want to see it in HD. So that's out there if anybody's interested. And I'll post links on our Facebook page about that if you're curious, if you want to see it. I'll probably be doing a completely biased review of that film when it comes out. Also, Police Story. Do you know Police Story? Not the TV show in the 70s. Jackie Chan's first real big international hits was Police Story from 1985. It was his first movie that he made that was set in the modern era. Up to that point, he had been doing films that were set in the past, like Feudal China, or he acted in Big Brawl, which was set in the 30s. But Police Story was his first modern action comedy film. That has been recently restored by Janus Films. The Hong Kong classics of the 80s and 90s, the films that, for me, set the standard for what an action film should be, they've been really neglected on video up until very, very recently. Eureka Entertainment in the UK is doing some nice additions, and I think maybe there's some Blu-rays in Hong Kong. But Janus is restoring Police Story 1 and 2, which are amazing movies and hilarious movies, and they're putting them back in theaters. So if you poke around online, I know the Brattle in Boston is showing one or both of those films. Alamo Drafthouse Yonkers is doing 2 as a double feature coming soon. And if you just keep your eyes peeled, you may be able to see these on the big screen, which was never an easy thing to do in the history of these films anyway. It was always, if you were lucky, a Chinatown might show it, or maybe like some kind of a museum might show these films, but they never had wide release of the early Chan films. So that's changing. And I presume that means that there'll be a Blu-ray release down the line too. And you can bet your hucklebuck I'll be buying those. Also, what else did I do this weekend? I went to the Alamo Drafthouse Yonkers. Sick of me saying that yet? Get used to it. And I saw something called The Mads Are Back. This is The Mads from Mystery Science Theater, which is Trace Beaulieu and Frank Conniff. the guys who were, the bad guys on Mystery Science Theater, and have also done things like Cinematic Titanic and some of the other post-MST riffing programs. They go out themselves now and they live riff movies. So they do the Mystery Science Theater thing where they show an old goofy movie and they sit there in the theater seat with microphones and they just crack wise the whole time. This will be the third time I've seen them there. It's really, really funny. The live riffing allows them to sort of work the crowd a little bit or be a little bit more contemporary than if it was a recording, or just off the cuff come up with really funny stuff. I'm sure predominantly they know what they're going to say. The movie was The Tingler with Vincent Price, which is a favorite William Castle film of mine that we saw on Friday. It was hilarious. It was a blast. And I would highly recommend. They toured the nation. They do a lot of Alamos, but they do other theaters too. If you ever see a listing for The Mads Are Back, they don't usually tell you what the films are going to be in advance. It doesn't matter. Just go. It's hilarious. And then they stand up and they do a Q&A for as long as anybody wants after the film, which is also funny. They're funny. And they sign things and take pictures and all that in the lobby of the theater. It's a heck of a good time and it's totally worth it. So we are not going to be here. I am not going to be here next week because the building we are in is going to be closed for the holidays. So it'll be 2 weeks until you see my smiling and hopefully less puffy and bruised face again, unless anybody gives me lip. And I will be back with films not too limited to Glass and whatever else comes out. So until then, I am Mark, and I am the Cinemaniac.